meeting of Bridgewater Town Council to order. So sad, it's our last regular Town Council meeting of the year. So I'll just have to wait till January to have more fun on Mondays. We'd like to note that Town of Bridgewater is a Mi'kmaq. It's the unceded and ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people, and we are very fortunate to be here. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the agenda as circulated? Councillor Thorburn, seconded by Deputy Mayor Tanner. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Announcements from members of council. Deputy Mayor.
The Christmas on the Lahade Committee has organized the Best Decorated House Contest again for this year, for the first time. They did it last year, I guess. So between December 12th and 17th, some judging will occur. And the first prize is a $500 Gals gift certificate. Second prize is a $250 Atlantic Superstore gift certificate. And third prize is a $100 South Shore Center gift card. So we encourage everyone to light up the town and be eligible for the prizes. So we'll hopefully see lots of fun, lots of lights.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Thank you to the committee for all their work as well. Other announcements? I guess I'll just say, I know the last week or so has been stressful. People in Nova Scotia, especially people in Antigonish, and our thoughts are with them. I do want to remind people, though, that we've been here before, and we turned things around rather quickly, and we will do that again. Fortunately, in Lunenburg, Queens, the numbers today is that there's still just one active case in Lunenburg, Queens. But we do know that will change. The key is to take care of each other, support each other, support local businesses, follow the protocols because we know they work. And like I said, I have no doubt at all that this will turn around rather quickly. And I do want to thank everyone in the community, residents, businesses, young and old, for doing their part, taking care of each other. That's why we've been so successful in this province, and that's why we will continue to be. So thank you for that. Now to staff introductions. I'm excited for this. We've got lots of staff. So maybe we'll turn over to Lynette to start the ball rolling, and then staff can just kind of come down and introduce our newcomers.
Hi, everybody. So I'm really excited to introduce you to Lena Ali. Lena is the newest member of our Des Brisé Museum team. She comes to us with a journalism and an international development background. And she might be a familiar face because she did work locally at Lighthouse Now for a time. Most recently, she was with Suzanne Lonis-Proff's office. So we have the benefit of her having worked with multiple levels of government. Welcome addition. And if you haven't been into the museum lately, come on by. She'll be the first face that you see coming through the door. Yeah, so Lena, if you want to share a little bit about yourself, that'd be great.
So I'm originally from Home Bay, and I grew up in the area. And like what I said, I've worked at Lighthouse Now, and I have the privilege of covering stories across the Newfoundland County and getting to know our community organizations and people. I'm really excited to be in the role as engagement coordinator, working on the team, and thank you so much for having me.
It's great.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Excellent. Just to add to that, our winter exhibit, we will be calling for all of your photos, old and new, of the activities that you do over the winter season. So keep an eye out for that because we want to post our photos that we have in the collection alongside our community photos. So we're asking for people to participate in that way. Excellent.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Welcome again.
Thanks.
Who's next? Who's going to...
Yep. So it's my turn.
Yeah, your turn. Greg down.
Okay, so council's already met Greg Brown, but I'll reintroduce him to everyone here. Greg Brown is our new Economic Development Officer. He started work today officially, but he has been involved in some of our discussions on the development of our economic development strategy, which is where we met him before. Greg comes with 30 plus years of economic development experience, a very strong economic development background, working both in the private and the public sector. And he has an economic development professional designation as well from the University of Waterloo. So it's great.
I'll keep it short because I know you have a long agenda, but thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm very excited to be here. Looking forward to working with everyone to craft a new strategy and get back to implementing it in the weeks and months ahead. So, again, thank you, and look forward to getting to know everybody better. I had a chance today to meet many of the staff who I've forgotten all their names, of course, but I'll very quickly learn them again, I'm sure. So, appreciate that, and I'll leave it at that.
Well,
Nice to be here.
welcome, Greg. We're glad you're here, and we're glad to have the opportunity during our economic development strategy sessions to have you down and interacting with us and hearing your input, having your input and your feedback. So that was great.
I think we have much to offer and many good opportunities here. So positive future.
Great, welcome.
Thank you.
And last but not least, our Director of Community Development.
Well, it's my great pleasure to introduce Kayla Byrne as Administrative Assistant for the Community Development Department. So Kayla's originally from BC, CB, Cape Breton. So originally from Cape Breton and has chosen to make this a short home after experiencing 5 provinces and spending the past 5 years with the municipality of Jasper in Alberta. So in Jasper, Kayla was the Legislative Services Coordinator. She supported the Mayor's Office and was the frontline customer service and program services and policies. She organized and recorded meetings and special events, maintained municipal governance, and also managed the administration of Jasper's municipal sanitary. So she comes with a wide range of experience that really fits in with roles and responsibilities of being an assistant role. I'm really thrilled to have her on the team supporting the. Yeah, just welcome to say a few words. I'm excited to be here. Happy to be back in Nova Scotia. I'm happy to be back working in local government. So I look forward to getting to know you.
That's great. Welcome. I'm glad to have you here. No pressure. You've got some big shoes to fill. That's great. So welcome to all our new staff. Down to delegations. I know that we had a scheduled delegation who's not going to be here tonight. Are there any members of the public here that wish to address council? Not seeing any. So we'll move down. We have the minutes of November 22nd, 2021 regular council meeting. Any errors or omissions with those? I have a motion to approve the minutes as circulated. Councilor McDonald, seconded by Councilor Conklin. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. All right, we're going to go down to our public hearing now for the final consideration development agreement for 102, 108 Aberdeen Road, 14 Hurdle Drive. So, as is our normal procedure, we kind of end our council meeting or pause our council meeting and call the public hearing to order. I've just basically told you what the agenda is. The rules of, the statutory requirements have all been met. And so we will go through this as we normally do and turn it over to our planner. See, Ms. Childs is here to run us through her overview.
Thank you. So an application was submitted to develop a multi-unit residential development at the corner of Aberdeen Road and Hurdle Drive, as you can see shown on the map. The intent is to combine 3 existing parcels, so 102 and 108 Aberdeen Road, as well as 14 Hurdle Drive, and that would be consolidated into approximately a 41,000 square foot property. And currently there is a single unit dwelling at 108 Aberdeen Road, and the other 2 parcels are vacant. The application is specifically to construct a 35-unit residential development on these lots. The intent of the applicant is to construct a 34-unit building while also maintaining the existing single-unit dwelling. And the new building would be 4 stories in height, and due to the topography going up Aberdeen Road, looks more like 3 stories towards the back. And it's proposed to be composed of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. The property is zoned as urban commercial, or C3, in the land use bylaw. The property is designated as general commercial in the future land use map of the municipal planning strategy. And that designation is what council envisions for the property in the future. and the C3 zone falls within this designation, so it's supported in what council envisions for these properties. The surrounding zoning is more urban commercial, LaHave commercial, institutional, single unit residential, and high density residential. And the surrounding uses are a mix of single unit dwellings, multi-unit residential dwellings, offices, and some commercial, including a restaurant and retail. So this is the proposed site plan of the property. It includes the new proposed building in gray and the existing single unit there in white. The new building would front onto Hurdle Drive down here. And due to the layout, much of the building that's adjacent to Aberdeen Road would be pushed back, set back behind the single unit residential dwelling. And you can see that the property line is along here on Aberdeen Road. But the setback would actually be a bit larger than shown because the town owns a section of land between that current property line and Aberdeen Road. And there are 6 parking spaces proposed outside of the building, on the side of the building off Hurdle Drive. And there's proposed underground parking as well, with the entrance in that same spot off of Hurdle Drive. The front entrance to the building would also be off Hurdle Drive, the pedestrian entrance. And there would be outdoor amenity space and landscaped podiums in 3 areas of the development. So towards the back, along the side, and then along this side. And buffering would be required near the property lines of the property in the back, as well as the new building being built at 18 Hurdle Drive beside it. And the building at the back would be separated by a fence, and the building on the side would be separated by either a fence or landscaping. And that would have to provide a buffer in all 4 seasons and be low enough. That's because the windows on the first floor of both of those adjacent buildings are approximately the same height. So this is a rendering of the proposed building as you would see it from Hurdle Drive. You can see there the main entrance in the middle, balconies, the entrance to the parking lot on the right there, as well as the entrance to the underground parking. And the ground floor is where the parking is located, and there's the lobby entrance at the front. This is a rendering of the proposed building from the corner of Hurdle Drive and Aberdeen Road. And as I mentioned, it looks like a 4-story building in the front, and as you can see kind of going further back, it's more like a 3-story building. And you can also see at the edge where it begins to cut in and steps back a bit from the property line. The building would be approximately 40 feet in height. So the land use bylaw requires a set amount of parking for all developments. But because this development is through a development agreement, they are used as guidelines. It doesn't have to be strictly adhered to. So the land use bylaw requires 45 vehicular parking spaces, and the applicant is proposing 43, with 2 of those being accessible. And the proposed development agreement would specifically state a minimum of 40 parking spots, just in case there was any issues with getting all of the proposed 43, but the accessible parking spaces would still be required. The land use bylaw also requires 18 bicycle parking spaces, and that's what the applicant is proposing. And that would be included in the development agreement. The bicycle parking is proposed to be located inside the parking garage, but if it isn't, it would have to follow the land use bylaw requirements because it's not explicitly stated that they would differ in the development agreement. A traffic study has been conducted and reviewed by the engineering department. Information was provided about effects to the street in the immediate area, expected trip generations, and the advantages and disadvantages of maintaining or removing the turning restrictions on Hurdle Drive in Aberdeen. And a final review has not been completed yet. There's still a bit more information needed, but that would be completed prior to the issuance of permits rather than through the development agreement process, since the development agreement is focused on the property itself, not the surrounding area. So the traffic study provided information on trip generation estimates, and the development is expected to generate approximately 190 vehicle trips on a typical weekday. And this would be composed of 95 vehicles entering and 95 exiting. Of the total weekday trips, 13 of those are expected during the morning peak hours and 15 in the afternoon peak hours. And so this would mean approximately 5 to 7 vehicles along McNeil Drive, which heads up off Hurdle Drive, and 6 to 10 vehicles on Aberdeen Road during those peak hours. The consultant took into consideration the new development at 18 Hurdle Drive, the adjacent building that's being developed. And with the addition of those trip estimates, this would mean approximately 14 to 16 vehicles on McNeil and 17 to 20 on Aberdeen Road, again, during those peak hours. The land use bylaw requires amenity space for multi-unit residential developments in this zone. The required space from the land use bylaw is just over 7,500 square feet, and the applicant is proposing just over 8,400, and that amount would be specified in the development agreement. And it would also state that the amenity space would have to be made up of at least balconies, landscaped podiums, outdoor amenity space, and a minimum of 700 square foot common room inside. As I mentioned, buffering would be required between the development and the adjacent properties, and those are shown on the site plan that would be included with the development agreement. A landscaping plan will be required prior to issuing any development permits and must be approved by the development officer. And there would be a focus on the interaction with the corner of the property at Aberdeen and Hurdle. The land use bylaw doesn't require affordable housing units in any developments, but for certain developments, policy does permit that a developer may increase their density by 20% if 50% of the additional units are affordable. So a 20% addition to the permitted density in this zone is 6 units, and 50% of those 6 additional units would have to be affordable. Without the bonus, this zone permits a density of 30 units per acre, and in the case of this development is 29 units because the property is just under an acre. And so with the bonus density, the additional 6 units that could be included would bring the total to 35, and that's the amount that's being permitted in the development agreement. And it's up to the developer to work with a third-party housing organization to create an agreement to support this density bonus. So just to summarize what the development agreement actually includes, the permitted use, as I mentioned, would be a total of 35 units as a collective development on a single lot. And as mentioned, it doesn't stipulate if it's, that it has to be comprised of a 34-unit building and a single unit dwelling, just 35 units in total. A site plan that you saw is included as a schedule to the DA, as are the elevation drawings. And the elevation drawings would be included, so the height, massing, and the exterior design of the building would be in substantive accordance with the elevation drawings. The parking requirements, as previously described, would be included. Additionally, requirements for amenity space, buffers, and affordable units would be included. And this application was received just before the wastewater betterment charge was passed. So the developer has the option to either complete a wastewater study and contribute to offsetting or pay the betterment charges. And the applicant has completed a study and intends to contribute that way, but the development agreement does state if they decide not to go that route, that the betterment charge bylaw shall be adhered to. And a stormwater management plan will have to be submitted and to the satisfaction of the town engineer prior to the issuance of a development permit. So a public participation meeting was held on October 7th. Notification was provided to properties within 100 feet of the property, and an ad was posted in the South Shore Breaker. 5 members of the public attended, and 1 email was received. And the main discussion topics were the traffic on Hurdle Drive and Aberdeen Road, as well as the desire for affordable housing in town. So staff review the town's policy when analyzing the development and creating a development agreement. So the current zone, the C3 zone, is meant to accommodate commercial development, mixed-use development, and multi-unit residential development, which contribute to a more compact urban character. So this development is in line with that description based on the type of use and the location within town. And the municipal planning strategy encourages a mix of land uses, compact development, and a range of housing options overall. The municipal planning strategy contains policy statements specific to development agreements, and they focus on the following list. I'll go into detail about a few of them. So for compatibility of use, the land use is compatible with those adjacent to it because the surrounding uses are single and multi-unit residential, as well as offices and commercial. The property is also close to a main commercial area, so it's an appropriate location for multi-unit residential. For the compatibility of the building would be nearly the same height, scale, and bulk as the adjacent building being constructed at 18 Hurdle Drive. The building would also be taking into consideration existing buildings around it, as it would be built around that existing single-unit dwelling on one of the properties. A landscaping plan would be required prior to permit issuance. Regarding infrastructure, wastewater offsetting would have to be provided, and service drawings would be required before permit issuance. The traffic study would need to be approved prior to permit issuance, and parking requirements would be included in the development agreement as described before. And there were no concerns regarding environmental impacts. So the municipal planning strategy also contains general policy statements, and those that related to this development application were providing vehicular and bicycle parking, designing and locating parking in accordance with requirements, and requiring landscaping to enhance the area and reduce conflict with the surrounding uses. So that's been taken into consideration with the landscaping and the buffering. Residential policies were also analyzed, and the following were applicable to this development: minimizing conflict between land uses, supporting a full range of housing options and styles, providing a density increase when providing affordable housing, integrating active transportation, requiring amenity space, and promoting residential densification. And relevant commercial policy encourages compact urban form and infill development in the downtown. Policy CD8 was specifically analyzed as it relates to multi-unit residential development in the C3 zone. There is a requirement that the building must front onto an arterial or collector street, and this development would be located on the corner of an arterial and local street. The front entrance to the building would be on the local street, but the building would interact with Aberdeen Road through the inclusion of balconies and architectural and landscaping definition at the corner. As mentioned, that would be in the landscaping plan, so that would meet the requirements. The building is more than 2 stories, as required by this policy. The building design includes a distinct base and top, as well as corner articulation through a bump out, as well as the additional landscaping. And the minimum amenity space would be met and is included in the development agreement. So it's recommended that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater give second and final consideration to the proposed development agreement and enter into the development agreement regarding the properties.
Great. Thank you. Questions of the planner from council?
I just want to clarify, you did say that the traffic issues are separate from the development agreement. They're handled individually.
Yeah, so we look at traffic a bit more generally during this process to make sure there's no kind of major red flags and that the site plan and elevation drawings and everything wouldn't be affected. And then prior to getting building and development permits, that's when the whole design review is conducted and more confirmation would happen then.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Mackenzie, the minimum of 3 affordable housing units. So how does that actually work in practice? They become managed by a third-party provider. Who then checks that that's continuing on, assuming the development agreement stays in place?
Yeah, so it would be one of the things that the development officer would look at since they make sure that the development agreements are adhered to. We don't have a lot of examples actually where that's been used around town. And obviously affordable housing is something that we're looking at right now, and it depends on the provider. They might do things a little bit differently. So it's up to them to kind of create an agreement that works for their organization, but then it's up to the development officer to make sure
like
that's
an
being
annual
adhered to.
check kind of thing?
Yeah, I don't know the exact timelines, but I think,
Okay.
when everything else is being checked.
It's a great question. I'm learning. I think we're all learning about affordable housing. So I just learned last week that if it's if kind of your third party is CMHC, and you have if CMHC is underwriting the essentially underwriting the loan, but you get it through another lender, then CMHC requires that lender reports every year the income from each of those units, and they can, based on the income of the unit, know if it's still affordable or not. But that's only CMHC. With others, there aren't the same checks and balances. So it's your question's a good one, but it's inconsistent, I think, across the country and across the province. But I found that one very interesting. Other questions? Councillor Thorburn.
I had the same question as the deputy mayor, but those are affordable units. How long is that agreement in place? Is there a time limit on affordable units?
I know other ones were 15 years, but that's actually something I don't know for sure. I think it would depend on the organization again.
With the funding agency.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it depends on the agency in terms of the number of years, but the requirement in the development agreement remains as long as the DA is in place. Right?
Yes, yeah. And so other times there's been a requirement that those are always in place, and then other times a developer might not. This isn't an example of that, but they might provide more affordable units, but they only have to adhere to whatever the development agreement states.
Other questions from council? Just going through my little public hearing checklist here. Is there a presentation from the applicant?
So here, I don't think they're going to do a presentation, but they're happy to answer questions.
Okay. Are there any questions of the applicant, council? I don't see any public here. I don't know. We don't have anyone on Teams or anything. Okay, so there's no members of the public here. I don't have any closing remarks to make. So if there's no further questions, we'll close the public hearing. Just to make sure I do that. And then return to the regular council meeting, and there is a motion that needs to be made. What's the will of council? Councilor Thorburn, thank you.
Great. I would move that town council for the town of Bridgewater give second and final consideration to the proposed development agreement and enter into a development agreement regarding the properties located at 102 and 108 Aberdeen Road and 14 Hurdle Drive in a manner similar to the draft development agreement dated December 13th, 2021, as shown in Appendix A of Document 21-101B, and that the mayor and chief executive administrating officer are hereby authorized to execute the agreement only within the time frame described in the development agreement. Should the document not be signed within the time frame described in the development agreement, council shall consider any request to sign the development agreement as a new application and follow the entire process required by the Municipal Government Act.
Thank you. Seconded by Councilor Conklin. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Is there a 14-day appeal period for that? Yeah. So just so the public's aware.
Once the notice is
Once it's published.
Yeah.
That's good. Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. Down to correspondence for information. We've got a couple items there. Nova Scotia Power sent us a nice bill. I don't know how else to say it. Like it's not, this isn't. It annoys me. So, as we know, they changed all the street lights to LED. Great. Disagreed, whatever it was, 15 years ago when they started, because they replaced perfectly good working lights with LEDs, which means you had to throw perfectly good working lights in the garbage, which isn't very environmentally friendly, if you ask me. I would have preferred that when they burned out, they replaced them with LEDs, but that's not what they did. And subsequently, I guess they made a bit of an accounting error and decided that all the municipalities that didn't pay enough have to pay more. So I know it's just for information. Probably that's more than was needed to be said, but it does. I think it frustrates me, and I think it's important that the taxpayer know when there's $30,000 bill going to Nova Scotia Power.
Yeah.
I don't know if you wanted to add
the only thing I would add to that is they are a regulated utility, so they did have to go to the Nova Scotia Utility Review Board to have their methodology approved in terms of how they recovered the remaining balance of their stranded asset values for converting to LEDs. So that's all been approved. There is no interest being applied to this charge because they do understand that municipalities have been impacted by COVID, so the timing's not the best to be sending out this invoice, and ours is smaller than others. And given Kim's going to go over the second quarter report with council later, but it's probably something that we can pay out of this fiscal year's budget. We just wanted to make you aware of it because you will probably see the forecast is higher than budget on that particular item.
I really feel for the municipalities that got a larger bill and are going to struggle to pay it. I also don't think that's reasonable. I hope Nova Scotia Power makes some accommodation for them. We're very fortunate. Are there any questions on that? Yeah.
Have we ever done an audit on the posts? 1,654 of them? Do we know for a fact that's how many we have? Like, how do we ever know? Out of curiosity,
Yeah, weren't you counting them?
I wasn't. Was that my job?
Yeah, deputy mayor. It's the third thing down.
I don't know how do they track that? I mean,
Well, yeah,
no idea. Okay.
No idea.
No.
They are, as I say, they are regulated, so I'm assuming they would have to account for that to the board.
Yeah.
Our bills had reflected that they had been converted, just they didn't recover everything.
I feel like staff in the gallery going, please don't make a motion to have us go and count the street lines. Matt's not looking up.
Miss Hopkins says nothing better than me.
Is it a finance department, you think?
Yeah, it's gotta be, right?
I think it's finance. Yeah. Are you gonna make a motion?
Almost. I think what we should do is go back to those guys that they have those poles on town property. And if they put it on a personal property, they have to have an easement signed and pay, I think, the minimum of $1. We got quite a few poles around, maybe make an easement of it, and then make them build in.
That's not unlike the conversation you and I had, where I said we should tax the square footage underneath each pole and then send them a bill.
We do get grants in lieu, so Nova Scotia Power is required. There is an arrangement with the province for how municipalities get compensated.
Yeah. Just a thought.
I like where you're going with that.
Here's what it is.
8.2, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, an update on municipal and village code of conduct regulations.
Yeah, just that they're creating a committee that they had done the recruitment process for the committee members a while ago, and I guess it's just to let councils know that commitment was made to have the code of conduct for municipalities looked at and developed a bit more. So they're doing as they said they would.
This has been asked for many, many years by the NSFM, so long time coming. So we appreciate that this is moving forward. So that's good news. Down to correspondence for action. We have Bloomberg County Senior Safety Partnership Society request for a letter of support. I don't know if someone's speaking directly to this item. I mean, they're looking for an increase in provincial funding, which they have not had in. Have they ever had an increase in provincial funding? It's been a long time if they have.
That I'm just looking. It's part of their core funding. Yeah, there's only been one increase since 2014 in municipal funding, a 2% increase in 2018, and the province increased their funding in 2018 from 20,000 to 25,000. So that's been the last increase that they've had, and I do know that their core funding costs have gone up.
Certainly, no one's going to argue the value of this program in the community. Certainly, we'd like to convey that to the province and see an increase in funding. Any comments on that? Someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Doran?
Not so much a motion, just a comment. I mean, has our shares gone up any because our population has been increasing? And I think the units are contribute based on population.
I'd have to look at the funding model for that to see for for Lunenburg County.
Yeah.
So funding did increase, but I don't know if it was based on population or just it was just based on everyone contributed a little bit more.
Yeah, that's what I had thought, but I can confirm that for council in terms of how we fund that.
So that'll be interesting with the census data that's expected in the spring for population data, maybe? Earlier.
Might be spring, for demographics.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting to see as populations rise. There should be, so all those population-based funding formulas that we have should be reassessed, right? And reevaluated.
Yeah.
So good question. Someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor McDonald.
I move that Council for the Town of Bridgewater send a letter of support for the Senior Safety Program to the Minister of Seniors and Long-Term Care as requested in the letter from the Lunenburg County Senior Safety Partnership Society letter, document 21-165.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Tanner. Further discussion? Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Down to reports and recommendations. 10.1, recommendation of the Municipal Joint Service Board amendments to Chapter 203. That's a law chapter. Solid Waste Bylaw. First reading. I know we have Stephanie here from the MJSB to go through this presentation. The board members had this presentation a few weeks ago, so it's very interesting. I think she's going to run through it now.
No.
Nope. I feel like I can hear something.
We can hear you. We can hear your mouse, but not your voice, or we can hear you hitting your laptop.
Do you want to try?
Yeah, just
going to say, all else fails, exit and rejoin. Stacy, how do you get that hair just right at the back like that?
I don't know. I was just admiring
Is that just natural? It just so thick.
It's natural.
Welcome to Town Council. In case you just tuned in.
Even 4 years.
No.
If you go to the 3 dots at the top and then click on
Yeah.
devices, there should be a volume setting perhaps for your microphone, and maybe you can drag that up. Well, that was a little bit better, but.
When you get close to your device, it comes in a bit clearer.
It's
No.
not, it's, you don't have headphones, do you? Yeah, do we need
Stephanie, is this time sensitive? Can we defer it to the next council meeting?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, maybe we'll do that, and then we can seek out what your mic problem is.
No, that's fine, Stephanie. Don't worry about it. We'll see you in the new year. All right. So we'll just defer that to the first meeting
In January.
Yeah. Okay. 10.2, request for an easement for 450 LaHave Street. See, Mr. Brown is. Are you looking at someone?
Well, this is like a tri-party arrangement here.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
essentially, we received a request from Lisa Fleming, who's the general manager for the South Shore Center, to look for an easement from the town of Bridgewater that would be 20 feet in width to allow for a vehicular movement around 450 LaHave Street, which is the plaza where you have the CIBC and Value Village. There's a map that shows that. That's included in your package as well to kind of show you where the easement location would be. And it would result in them having to remove some parking stalls, which are just adjacent to the CIBC. It also aligns with where a pathway comes down that connects the Glen Allen subdivision to this development. So I did solicit just some preliminary comments from Mr. Brown and Mr. Feener with respects to any land use bylaw considerations as well as any infrastructure considerations that we may have to give. And it looks like there would be a little bit of work required in order to provide council with a definitive answer as to whether or not it's advisable to consider the request. So before we go down that road of investing the staff time and working with the applicant to see what needs to be done and have them do that in order for council to consider the easement, we're looking for some direction from staff, which with respects to whether or not you wish to consider it and have staff do that work. Primarily from the land use bylaw perspective, it's suggesting that there is some screening and buffering considerations as you're moving the travelway further in and closer to the subdivision and behind, as well as the pathway. And there should be some consultation with neighboring properties. Parking spaces aren't an issue. My understanding is there's sufficient parking there. From engineering's perspective, Larry had suggested that because the walkway is moving closer to the driveway, given the elevations, we may have to look at a retaining wall or fencing and restricting traffic flow to one way there because it is kind of a congested area with the Dairy Queen and the road coming up by the Tim Hortons and the road along the plaza. There's some sanitary and storm manholes that may be required to be adjusted a bit, which could be substantial or not. They don't know until there's further investigation done on that. And but did note that emergency access would probably be to the back of the building would be something that would be desirable. My understanding is they've gotten behind before about having this travelway would perhaps make that a bit easier on the vehicles going back there. So as I say, there is a bit of work involved, staff time to entertain the request. So it's come to council to see if council wishes to have that carried out so that we can advise the applicant.
Questions? Councillor Colwell.
There was a reference to the issues with manholes and sanitary system. Would that be borne by the applicant, the costs?
The report or the suggestion of staff is that yes, that to grant this easement would not be at any cost to the town.
Unless there was like an upgrade that benefited more people.
If there was something like that, then we would bring that back to council.
But otherwise, yeah, it would be on. Yeah. Other questions, Councillor McDonald?
Be interested in doing this work, looking at kind of that intersection area and how it can be designed to be a little more user-friendly. Because when you're coming up by Tim Hortons, it's very difficult to see traffic to the right, pedestrians coming down the pathway. There's no landing on the other side, so maybe while they're at it, it could be enhanced in some ways to make it, especially if you're talking about truck traffic, that further kind of congests that area.
Yeah, my understanding is that's all private.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So
but maybe some suggestions
to the developer with respects to how they could improve that area.
Yeah, that would be great.
I've always thought it should look almost like I know it's got the hash marks for a crosswalk, but it doesn't look like a crosswalk.
Mm-hmm.
It just has the lines, but perhaps it was more visible because I do see, right, it's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
It's nice to hear that they have potential for a good business. Requires some work from staff. What is the wish of council? Is it prepared to make a motion? Deputy Mayor Tanner?
I move that council of the town of Bridgewater direct staff to prepare a report outlining the matters to be addressed by South Shore Centre, document 21-162, to enable council to consider the easement request.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Thorburn. Further discussion? Questions? All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. 10.3 Wastewater Strategy Update. We have our Environmental Services Manager here to walk us through. Report. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. This evening, I wanted to give you a brief overview of the wastewater strategy, where we have been, where we're currently at, and where we will need to go in the future. So we're going to cover wastewater recommendations and implementation we've had to date from two major strategies that we've been working on. We'll talk a bit about the funding that will be required and how we're trying to achieve that before the 2031 deadline. We'll give you a little brief overview of the ongoing monitoring that we started in 2020 and will continue. We'll also talk about policy, process updates, and the wastewater betterment bylaw, which will be things that we've done to date and future steps. So the first major strategy that we looked into was in 2018, the Sanitary Master Plan that was generated from the Canadian Council of Ministers of Environment's target to eliminate all overflows by 2039, and their current target, enforced by Nova Scotia Environment, which requires no increase in wastewater overflows as a result of new or redevelopment. You may remember from that strategy the big circles, which represent our pump stations and their capacities. Any of the pump stations that show in purple is pump stations that are basically not achieving wet weather flows currently, which there's 4 to 5 of our major pump stations that not only don't achieve their wet weather overflow targets, but they also overflow during those events. And the circles in pink, of course, is the maximum pump station capacity. So our goal is to basically make those circles look more pink in the upcoming years, and that's what this strategy is all about. And in that strategy, we targeted about $52.6 million worth of repairs and upgrades as required in the wastewater system to achieve that. And when we look detailed into that $52.6 million, it required pump station increases, rehabilitations at a cost of $21.9 million, a reduction in stormwater throughout the collection system at an estimated cost of $28.9 million. Wastewater treatment plant upgrades of $1.7 million for the total cost of $52.6 million. Now, out of that strategy, it was very clear to us the pump station upgrades that we required and the wastewater treatment plant upgrades that we required, but we did want to do some further analysis on exactly where to target our best investment in the stormwater component of this. So in 2021, we had another study completed, which was the Inflow Infiltration study, which a lot of you have seen part of to date, but this will give you an overview of where things stand with that study. So that study looked at a detailed look of inflow infiltration throughout mostly the west side of town and a little touch on the east side. The consultants during this study, which were Design Point, they looked at the major repairs throughout the system, very detailed look at those repairs. They found leaks in manholes and pump stations. They actually inspected close to 200 manholes and the pump stations as part of that work, and found approximately 123 of those manholes required some form or another of repair. We also looked at catch basin connections that are connected directly to the sanitary sewer. And in that, we're probably in the neighborhood of about a dozen that are relatively easy and not connected to larger projects that were immediately identified as part of this study. Roof drains, footing drains, and some pump connections were looked at. It became very apparent in that study that we will need to take a much deeper look into some pump connections. And we have identified a lot of roof drains throughout town, probably close to 12, just in a quick study that can be addressed fairly quickly. Manholes in low areas, so manholes that sit lower than the asphalt beside them. There's approximately 12 identified in this study, which can be addressed in the upcoming years. And river flow that is coming into our pump stations through overflow pipes. That was approximately 2 stations that we can address in the near future. So through all of this, we have a very good roadmap of some immediate fixes and some longer term fixes to eliminate some of the I&I issues that we have in the system. And as you can see, they did do very detailed inspections while they were on this project. One of the other big things that we did as part of this project, we installed 8 flow meters throughout town. The majority are on the west side. And what they do for us, they quantify rainfall. So they're year-round installed. They look at dry weather flow, they look at wet weather flow, and they give us a really good benchmark, particularly in the trouble areas, of how fast our system's reacting to these rain events and how we can concentrate in certain areas that require a lot of work and some that we would need a lot less work. And we'll show you a bit about those in the ongoing monitoring. The other things that these reports did, they touched on a lot of things that we need to work on in the upcoming months to years. One of the big things that they've suggested, which you'll see the items that we still need to work on, they're highlighted in red. We need to quantify private lateral inflow. We need additional video work and smoke testing to really narrow down on the volume of water that these private laterals are bringing into our system and how we best would address them. Target areas will be the Smith subdivision, Murray and Noss streets, and a few other smaller streets have been identified as part of this report. From that, we will actually create an inventory of private stormwater connections and create a removal strategy. We'll also be notifying some private residences that have currently got lateral cross connections and that we will find in the future. The downspout folks that have downspouts connected to our sanitary system, for the most part, they will be notified immediately and asked to disconnect unless there's extenuating circumstances. Existing private catch basins and some pumps, they'll be addressed on a case-by-case basis and until we have full bylaw in place to address it for every situation. And the other thing that we were suggested to look at is consider flow flow monitoring at the completion of new developments. So everybody kind of assumes that new developments come to us brand new and working 100%, but studies are showing a lot of those systems are turned over in dry weather times of the year, so maybe the end of the summer, early fall. They don't actually go through the wet season. So if flow monitors are put on them, it has shown that some of them have groundwater that's still seeping in, and we actually receive a system that's leaking when we get it turned over to us. So that's an easy bylaw correction and construction change that could be implemented and save us a lot of work in the long run. The other thing that was recommended as part of this report, which we had already implemented, was flow offsetting for new developments of 1 liter per second of wastewater to the system, and it's offset by 2 liters of stormwater. The study also suggested that we should start looking at a few particular pieces of our policies. Public sewer bylaw, they suggest that you can, if you choose, inspect homes in I&I troubled areas to identify storm sewer connections. You can also implement a program to inspect laterals each time a property is sold, which would identify stormwater connections, and then you can possibly add fines or discontinuation of services until these connections are addressed or removed from the sanitary system. And to probably effectively implement any of those solutions, you may want to consider a cost-sharing program to give the homeowners some incentive and not quite such a shock to having to disconnect. So, in order to implement any of these strategies, it's clear to us that we will require additional funding. And currently we have a 10-year budget that is addressing a great percentage of the $52.6 million worth of upgrades. In addition, currently we have an approved ICIP project. We call it Pump Station 11 or Shipyards Landing, the upgrading of the pump station at Shipyards Landing, along with the new force main from Shipyards Landing over the wastewater treatment plant. It's approximately 13% of the sanitary master plan upgrades. In the past year, we've also submitted an application to the federal government Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund. If we were successful with this large-scale project being accepted, it is a 10-year budget supplement and a 10-year program. It would actually give us 75% of the sanitary master plan upgrades complete at year 10. In the event that we're not successful with that program, we would also target the items in red below. First one being a large-scale application to FCM and other federal and provincial programs as they come along. So just to give you a quick breakdown of what exactly that application to the federal government included. It included the replacement or rehabilitation of 5 major pumping stations through town, the elimination of 1 pumping station, upgrades to 4 of the major operating systems at the wastewater treatment plant, including the headworks, UV, clarifiers, and the RBCs. And we specified larger scale inflow infiltration projects. There were 16 of them, and we provided a list of what we currently think would be the most effective separation projects that would help us eliminate I&I throughout the system. Most of them, as you see here, on the west side of town in a concentrated area. So, ongoing monitoring. This is something that we've been working very hard to implementing over the last year or so. And a lot of it's new programs, a lot of it is collecting information, and it's a very important piece of the puzzle to help us narrow down exactly what we're looking for and if we're making progress. So one of the things we started long before 2020, but 2020 was actually the first time we came, or 2019 was the first time we came to council with this, is our overflow reporting. So you will see a list of 27 through to 2020 overflow reports. We collect this information daily. It's a list of overflows at our pumping stations that occur whenever we have a wet weather event or major rain event. You will see in the past 4 years, We overflow anywhere from 145 to 295 days a year, and the flows range from about 1.6 to 2.9 million meters cubed per year. You'll also note in 2020, we overflowed the least amount that we have in the past probably 5 years. I would attribute it to being an extremely dry year. We didn't have near as much precipitation or groundwater as in previous years, but time will tell. Hopefully, we'll also see a general reduction because we have been working on I&I separation projects. And of note, the wastewater treatment plant does not currently overflow, but we are always monitoring it in case increasing wastewater system causes any potential for that to happen. One of the other monitoring pieces that one of our partners does for us, Blue Nose Coastal Action Foundation, monitors the water quality in the Lateral River. And they have a number of points throughout the town of Bridgewater limits and outside. We were advised in past years and again this year that the water quality through the town limits is ranging from good to fair. We do see low dissolved oxygen levels throughout town, and bacteria exceedances particularly tied to rainfall events. So it is extremely important that we keep working on reducing those overflows to help the overall river quality. This is a new piece that we started in 2020. It's offsetting forecast, and it's I know the graphs are a little small, but hopefully everybody can see them. This is a cumulative average that I have put on the paper. So we started in 2020, and our expectation is every year we add to this. And our goal is the amount of offsetting that we are required to do must meet the development that we allow to occur every year. And that's why it's a cumulative average, because when we report to environment in 2039, we have to show that our progress has been steady and that we're keeping up with what we're allowing to enter into the system. So just to kind of give you a little breakdown of the graph, the pink color that you see is the required offset in cubic meters per year. So that's the amount of development flow that we're calculating theoretically that would be going into our system. It's approximately 39,000 cubic meters per year. The next color over is green. It's the offset achieved. So that's the amount of work that we've done to remove I&I water out of the system since 2022. I think I pulled this data to the end of November. And those two numbers, the offsetting achieved minus the offsetting required, gives you the gray box. So our goal is to keep that gray box underneath the zero line, which means we've achieved enough offsetting to allow the development that's happening in our system at a 2-to-1 offset. The blue box, which is very important in this equation, the blue box is actually what we're saying is estimated future addition. But future addition is calculated by the permits that planning currently have and developments that are currently underway. So those developments may actually get into operation before the end of the year. And if they do, they shift over to the pink, which means we have to add them to our amount of offsetting for the year. So that's why we include that blue box as part of this offsetting, so we have a good idea what else we have to offset for before the end of the year. So it's a very complicated system to try and balance, and it's very hard to make enough to balance out in the run of a year, because we're not always sure if the developer is going to actually need the wastewater system this year or next year, but we try our best to stay a little ahead. This graph will show you the difference that we're trying to achieve between year 2020 and 21. This is the same graph that you just saw with your offsetting requirement, your offsetting achieved, and the difference between the two. As you can see, we had relatively little to deal with last year, and we've almost doubled and tripled in some cases in what we see as we move to the right. So if development keeps up at this pace or worse, it is going to be exceptionally challenging for us to keep up with our current level of work. So we will try and bring this back to council annually so you get a good picture of what's happening and if we're staying ahead. One of the other things that we're doing, which is again a long-term piece for us, is flow monitoring throughout the system. Those 8 flow meters that we have installed, this will give you a brief look at what we see every day. It'll give you an idea of how we're collecting information on storms. It's used for a number of things. It's used for our daily information. It's also used to help us troubleshoot and look for locations for reductions. We also use it to calibrate our sewer model, which is very early in its work. And I'll just give you a little bit of explanation on this graph. This is actually a very isolated system, fairly private. We put the flow monitor in there just to see how it was reacting to stormwater. We didn't actually expect it was having stormwater issues because it's not on the west side of town. It's on the east side, where we don't think we have as many problems. And on the far left of that graph, just about at the very start of the graph, we had an average rain event, and the graph shot through the ceiling. Those lines that you see, the blue is the flow level in the pipe, and the green is the actual flow that's coming through the pipe. When that graph increases in height on the graph, we're getting much higher flows, and the tighter the lines are together, they're coming much faster. So that shows me that particular area is highly influenced by a very minor rain event, and yesterday, or the weekend's rain event, put that graph almost double to what's there. And then after the storm, a few days after the storm, you see it goes back down to almost half or less of what it was during the storm event. So this is how we use these flow monitors to really get a good handle on our system and know where we have to start looking. So it's working, and we'll continue to work hard with those monitors. We did also, as part of our planning the last time, we were looking at options to reduce the impact on our infrastructure and what we needed to do to keep up with this offsetting. So a couple of the things that we looked at and haven't got deeper into yet is downzoning or reducing density, development agreement restrictions, and inflow infiltration all over town. So one of the things we did do was we implemented the wastewater offsetting bylaw this past year, which is helping us fund the inflow infiltration programs. And we're implementing projects at the same rate or a little better in development currently. As we look forward and try and figure out how we're going to reduce peak wet weather flows into the system, I wanted you to have kind of a timeline of what we're looking at if we use our current 10-year budget, along with whatever supplemental funding we can have. The one pump station elimination and pump station replacements rehabilitation, we're looking at probably a 10-year window to implement that. I&I for overflow elimination, we're a minimum of 15 years to accomplish that. And full rehabilitation on manholes, all the ones that they're identifying throughout town, it would be more than 15 years to deal with all of that. Private property I&I separation, that's a review of the bylaws. Depending on how fast council wants to implement it and what types of things they want to implement, that can go within the next 10 years or less. This seems to be where we need to kind of focus our future efforts in addition to our continuous monitoring. We need to start working on policy changes to the bylaws. So one of the big things we will implement next year will be removing flat fee for sewer and using a new user pay system, which includes fund depreciation. We'll also currently have and will continue the development charges through the wastewater betterment bylaw. We need to take a much deeper look into the sewer bylaw itself. we will require a private property disconnect of storm sewer from the sewer. It's just a matter of how we're going to implement it. We need flow monitoring on the new developments. That should be a relatively easy target to achieve. Public sewer bylaw. We need to be able to inspect homes in the I&I trouble areas and identify storm sewer connections. And we need a program to inspect laterals each time a property is sold if we choose not to be able to go into any homes we choose. So there's a variety of ways we could do it, but we wanted to put all the different options out there. And these are big programs. They're very costly to homeowners in the town, so we may need to look at some cost sharing or funding programs to implement effectively. I'll also ask Nick to speak from the planning perspective. There are a few things that they can do to help us out as well.
Thanks, Audrey. So from the community development / planning perspective, we're about to begin a comprehensive review of our planning documents. It should take 2 to 3 years to complete. There are many aspects to a municipal plan review. There could be significant changes through such a process. One thing we'll want to do is create a growth management plan. Basically, managing population growth, allow for strategic densification. Basically, where do we want to concentrate growth? Where can Bridgewater grow? Locations based on our wastewater capacity, monitoring programs, and planned upgrades, and in strategic, compact, and walkable locations. With that, policies related to development can encourage densification where we want infill growth, as well as strategic growth areas such as Glen Allen, where wastewater may be gravity fed to the treatment plant. We still want development in other areas of town, and that's where gentle densification can be accomplished, and lower densities can be accomplished with help our infrastructure master plans that will hopefully ensure proper attention to wastewater infrastructure. So, about to begin that process at very early stages. At this time, these changes and to be informed by this growth management plan or strategy, which is a really key component to understanding where we can grow, where we want to grow. It's difficult to make these changes as an interim measure between now and that planning document. So what the planning side is suggesting is that this all be considered and reviewed thoroughly through the document review process to those core planning documents, so this plan strategy, this bylaw, 17 bylaw, together with all the engagement and consultation that we comprehensive review to ensure we tackle this problem.
And lastly, we just wanted to give you an idea and a picture of where we're proceeding in the upcoming years. Definitely in the next 2 to 3 years, we have to focus on the policy pieces. We need to put some tools in place so that we can deal with private laterals, so we can deal with the development throughout town, and also our continuous programs. So we need to continue to implement the strategy that we have been giving for the last few years. We need to keep our monitoring going and really narrow down what gives us the best results. So you'll see that in the timelines, and hopefully it gives you a picture of what we've been up to. Are there any questions?
Questions from council? Councilor Thurber.
Flow meters. They're very important. We introduced them in the fire service in 2005 to let us know how many gallons of water we use on a fire call. So you get accurate information to the water department because they want to know. And I guess my question would be, do you have an accurate price on what a flow meter would cost? And the next one is probably how many could we use to get an accurate
Are you looking, right now we use larger flow meters that are just within manholes. Are you
Right.
talking those, or are you talking the ones for private lateral?
No, I think larger ones, because that's where you get the best picture. I mean, to get a measurement in smaller locations, you've always got your water meter that reading, right? But I'm thinking the bigger ones where all these flows into the sewer are from different sources, not just from the house.
Yes, so we have looked at and bought flow meters recently, so we're at about $10,000 a meter just in the install and purchase price.
Audrey, I shared with council just tonight an interesting podcast I was listening to about valuing natural assets and so on. And one of the points made in that podcast was how a town or municipality in Riverview has done it, Saskatoon's done it, will build $1 million pond, holding pond as an example, for stormwater versus throwing $2.7 million at it for piping. Have we ever explored that kind of option within, yeah?
We did at a smaller scale. We did for Shipyards Landing pump station. We tried to balance that off versus the force main that we're putting across. And for us to do it, it would have had to have been basically at King Street at Shipyards Landing, and we would have had to put the equivalent of a 30-foot deep football field there, right at Shipyards. So for that particular application, it didn't prove to be successful.
Okay.
But we would look at it for any of the future ones if there's a way to deal with it. But the way we've been sort of looking at it to date is trying to extract that infiltration first. So get it to brooks, get it to streams, the natural water courses, because we do have the ability to get it in a lot of locations there first.
Okay. Interesting.
Kind of like the one at Old Town Hills development too, right? With stormwater retention ponds. But you're thinking of like more places.
Yeah, see more places to hold it.
Town property. Yeah. Other questions, Council? Really informative as always. A lot of detail in there, but it's I appreciate the update. It's certainly very helpful. I think it's important for the residents to see. It's a long journey. We've got a long way to go, but making progress. Yep. I've heard great things, lots of positive feedback on the public washrooms going to be down at Shipyards Landing with the pump station there. That was a really good decision to make. So well done down there. Thanks. 10.4 is tender 20-12E survey grade GPS system. Things keep going up in price, so I think this will not be the last time these things happen.
Good evening. So included in this year's capital budget was the purchase of new survey grade GPS equipment. Due to the fact that our current equipment dated 2014 and is now considered obsolete, and having difficulty or no longer be updated. That this year is important to the engineering department. Collect the data with it. We lay our construction projects with it. Certainly, that all the information we collect is important to a future development of our asset management system. We issued the tender packages and they the tender closed in November. Those tenders were evaluated. We received 2. All the tender submissions were being compliant. And the submission with the highest score would be Inflow surveying equipment. However, their cost of the unit far exceeded our budget, which was $45,000 to award if awarded to them, approximately $22,000 net adjusted yield budget. However, there are operational costs, certainly on a year-by-year basis, but they certainly don't make up the difference with it, that purchase. So the options staff for the council would be do not award the GPS system and be introduced in the capital 22.3 capital budget. Certainly award to the highest points accumulated and approve the over expenditure for a total price of $74,347.50 for the further decision for any further information. Staff have reviewed it, given that we're very close to new budgets. We're currently working on it. On wood, the risk is low that our current system will go down. next 6 months. Staff are recommending that we do another work and reintroduce next year's capital budget.
Questions on that? I know we're obligated to go out to tender. I know that. The disadvantage of that is you can't just go and shop around for the cheapest price. But do we ever go out and look at it and say, like, in this case, we were way off. I know price of things are going up, and so it's not saying it in terms of someone missed the price. It just things, inflation and all that. But do we ever look and go, okay, if I wanted to go online right now and go to that manufacturer and price out those pieces of equipment, do we ever check to see if, you know what, we were right, it should be $45,000, but the only people that bid up so much that like it's not us, it's them kind of thing?
So with prior to doing the budget, we did go and receive those staff normally budgeting. In one of the submissions, certainly the unit was what the staff would consider far superior than we need. The second submission, it was probably more than we needed as well. So we feel that the next time when we re-tender, we'll clarify and make sure we're doing exactly what we need and not just anything more. Just, we believe there might be some cost savings associated with clarification of the tender with the two different components, the receiver and whatnot. So, we think that there's, and the cost is going up as well. So we hope that we can realize the savings that we discussed with the lowest tender after.
Councillor Thorburn.
Yeah, that's my question. We've had a few of these that's come in way higher than what we had estimated. But my question is, if we wait, it could come even higher. So it could cost us more, theoretically, if we wait a year.
We certainly can.
And
I don't think that we will. I mean, it's certainly a risk. And never know until those tender bids come in. So we're hoping that with a little bit more clarification on the tender specifications to ensure that we're not getting more of a unit that we need, that we'll realize a little savings of the selective budget according to the market, what we see in the market right now.
So I would assume that when you come in with your new budget, your $45,000 will probably go up?
Correct, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Other questions? Is someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Caldwell.
Move the council for the town of Bridgewater not award tender 21-12E, new survey grade GPS, and that purchase of the new GPS system be introduced in the 2022-23 capital budget.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Coughlin. Further discussion? All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Our next item is RFP 2021-12, energy efficiency upgrades for lighting and HVAC for multiple facilities. So Mr. Feener coming down.
So as part of the utility commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, staff issued this proposal for energy efficient upgrades in November and received 6 submissions by the closing date. The RFP included supplied lighting for the town hall, public works, wastewater, and water treatment, heat pump hot water heater for wastewater and water treatment, mini split heat pumps for the Aberdeen station, wastewater treatment, and smart high efficiency circulator pumps for public works. So staff evaluated based on 5 criteria with minor reports. The approved budget is $121,000. The total project cost is $84,419.50 net adjusted. We are expecting or anticipating $30,000 in rebates on completion of the project. Staff have included 4 options for council's consideration, and we are recommending that each item be awarded to the company receiving the cost evaluation.
Questions from members of council? Seemingly pretty straightforward. Someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Thorburn.
I'll move that Council for the Town of Bridgewater award RFP 2021-12 energy efficient upgrades for lighting and HVAC for multiple facilities, as all measures have come in under budget and are eligible for efficiency Nova Scotia rebates and incentives as follows. Item 1, lighting supply only to Rexall Canada as per RFP submission dated 29th November 2021 for a total price of $43,092.20 full HST, $39,077.51 net HST. Item 2, supply and installation of heat pump water heaters to Harry Wino Limited as per their RFP submission dated 29th November 2021 for a total price of $9,599.05 full HST, $8,704.75 net HST. Item 3, mini split heat pump supply and installation to Bird Mechanical Limited as per their RFP submitted dated 29th November 2021 for a total price of $27,025 for HST, $24,507.21 net HST. And item number 4, supply and installation of smart circulator pumps to Seacoast HVAC as per their RFP submission dated 29th November 2021. Total price $13,376.23 full HST, $12,130.03 net HST.
Seconded by Councillor McDonald. Discussion. Certainly spreading all those around. Yeah. Contractor. Seeing no questions. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Next item is Bridgewater Board of Police Commissioners Council appointment. So just so people, we don't normally appoint to committees we're a year into really a 2-year period. I stepped away from the board. My son was accepted to the Atlantic Police Academy, and while that's in PEI, I felt just for the remove any notion of conflict of interest, I thought it would be best to just remove myself from the police board. And I've spoken to the chief about ensuring that any personnel matters do not go through me. They would go through CAO just to make sure that there's clear separation. So that leaves a vacancy. And is someone prepared to make a motion to appoint a new member? Councillor McDonald.
I would move that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater appoint Councillor Mike Conklin to the Bridgewater Board of Police Commissioners for the remainder of a term ending October 31st, 2022.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Tanner. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. You can vote for yourself. It'd be weird if you voted against it, but you can vote for yourself. 10.7 is second quarter financial report. Director of Finance is here to walk us through that.
Good evening, everyone. So we're at the end of Q2, which ended on September 30th. So the information's up to date as of that date. There's really just some really kind of big highlights. So to start with, we're projecting a surplus at year end of $619,000. That's what we're forecasting kind of at the halfway mark based on the information we know. The next quarter hopefully will be even more precise. So just kind of starting at the top of the operating report, the tax revenue, we are projecting that to be off by about $31,000. And we've had a lot of appeals. Particularly, there's some large commercial appeals that are still outstanding. So we are still anticipating some decrease in commercial tax revenue, particularly because of those. We may find that they don't come in as high as expected, but we've left that in the forecast. On the deed transfer tax front, we're projecting to be about $230,000 over budget. We're $280,000 over budget right now. The reason why we're anticipating could go down a little is now we're seeing not just high numbers, but drastic fluctuations, where September was half of the month before. So we went from $90,000 or $100,000 down to $48,000 for 1 month, which would have been more in line with what we had budgeted. So now we're, where we had one really low month, we were unsure if we're going to continue to see volatility, if it was a one-time thing. So we didn't want to project that out to be too high at this point in time. But we do know it's going to be much higher than budgeted. Grant and Lou's that one's actually going to be about $41,000 over budget, and that's because the province has acquired additional properties that were included in their calculation of the grant they pay us based on properties they own. For sales of service, there's a few things going on with sales of service. The police are forecasting to be $200,000 over budget on their fees for service, which is significant, which is high. But then we've got some other impacts of COVID also in sales of service, including recreation registration pool revenue and fair share of films, which are expected to be about $75,000 under budget. Special events such as Canada Day, Christmas on the Lahave, that had reduced sponsorship and banner revenue, and parking and transit fees are going to be under budget as well. So those are offsetting that police amount that's going to be over budget.
So just for clarification for the public, because I think you missed the word revenue in there.
Right.
So it's to the good. So when the $200,000 over budget in police fees for service revenue.
Yes,
I don't want people to go $200,000 over budget. No, they're making $200,000 more money than they budgeted for in sales of service.
Absolutely. On the other revenue from owned sources, this is also projecting to be over budget by $233,000. The large things making that up are the fact that building and development fees. We've had some presentations earlier this evening that talk about development and the activities, and that at this point in time they're about $53,000 over budget, and we're forecasting to be about $60,000 over budget on building and development fees. In addition, Council approved a wastewater betterment charge during this fiscal year, so there was no budgeted revenue for that at the time the budget was approved. And we are projecting that that will actually be around $184,000 over any anticipated revenue. So that's very significant. We also have positive variance on some cemetery revenues of about $15,000. However, parking meter and police court fines are significantly under by about $35,000. Sorry. And a bit of interest on sewer and taxes over budget by about $15,000. So we've got some wide variety of things happening as far as revenue goes. Our unconditional transfers from government are things that we get grants for that we don't have to pay back, or they're not based on us doing something in particular. So you'll see that unconditional grants is over budget by $531,000. So when after the election happened, they agreed to do some work on municipal funding, and as an interim measure, they decided to double our capacity building grant, otherwise known as, or previously known as, equalization. So we received another $531,000 in operating funds. We haven't determined anything that needs to be spent on in particular, other than our capital budget, which you'll be seeing in the new year. So we are recommending, or I guess staff will suggest that that's going to be put in reserve to be used at a later date. And you'll see under the expenses, we do show it as a transfer to reserve. And I guess I just wanted to point that out so that as we go into the capital budget season, we've got that kind of top of mind of, we have this $531,000 that we should be considering, whether that's operating capital, what the use of that will be. So we wanted that to stand out. On conditional transfers, that's projecting to be about $60,000 over budget. The bulk of that's from placemaking grants of about $50,000 that were received, and you will see offsetting expenditures for that. So overall revenue is projecting to be $1.1 million over budget. On the expenditure side, a few things to highlight, most of which the savings are a result of vacant staff positions that were budgeted. So you'll see that under both administration and financial management. And under other government services, we're actually showing to be over budget by 44,000, but part of that is a result of grants to organizations. So at the end of last fiscal year, Council decided to put funding that wasn't given out last year into a reserve so that could be paid out to organizations that required assistance in this fiscal year. So there was $15,000 set aside for that. In addition to that, we received about $40,000 through the designated community project fund that was received by the town. Donation receipts were issued, and council subsequently approved a grant to those organizations. So it's showing over budget, but there was revenue offsetting that as well. Under protective services, just a couple things to note. Under police, it's showing police to be over budget. Part of that, or most of that, comes from the fact that we had a statutory holiday that wasn't budgeted for. So that was impactful. And under fire protection, they're currently under budget by about $76,000. They're projecting to be closer to budget, but at this point in time, that's savings on training and some maintenance that haven't not happened just due to timing.
Can I just ask a question about the statutory holiday? Is that
Was the one at the end of September?
yeah, but is that dollar figure all because of that? Or
Most of it.
most.
There might be some other things, but the holiday pay for an entire staff.
No, I think it's I'm not disputing the value of the day. It's an important day, but I think it is important for people to realize that a statutory holiday, there's costs associated with statutory holiday. Sometimes we don't think about those things.
So where would we find how much it is for the rest of our staff? And we're only talking about the police department.
Yeah, so I think we had done a report to council actually when we were presenting the option of declaring it a holiday. And I believe it was close to $40,000 as well. The police would be a little bit different because they have full crew. They have to continue to provide services that day. So we would have maybe some call in for public work or wastewater, but most of ours wouldn't have been overtime.
Yeah, so our salaried staff
Salary
were
staff
working.
would show it's on.
Yeah.
But it still cost
But we
us
still
money.
calculated it. It was around 40,000.
So really, it's a $75,000 holiday.
All right. So on the I guess under transportation services, both common services and roads and streets are currently showing under budget but by the end of the year, it's anticipated that those funds will be spent. Most of that is just timing of maintenance as well as timing of training. So those things haven't taken place, so it's a bit under budget. Under environmental health services, for the most part, over budget by, or forecasted to be over budget by $100,000 in sewage collection and disposal. Some of that is due to additional chemical costs over budget, but as well equipment maintenance and repair that happened during the year, including replacement of manholes and issues with pump station 12. Under garbage and waste collection, we're projecting that expenditure to be under budget, which is a positive variance. Part of that is just due to the budget was set too high, so we're just recognizing a lower actual cost. Under environmental development, just under the economic action plan, this is where we actually have the expenditures for placemaking, so that's forecast to be over budget. But as we just talked about 2 minutes ago, we do have the offsetting revenue for those from grants for those. Under recreation and culture, recreation programming is anticipated. The expenditures will be under budget by about $45,000, partially offsetting the lost revenue. And under parks and playgrounds, festivals and cemetery, all of those have various things such as labor and maintenance, which are all under budget. And under the last item, under fiscal services, transfers to other funds, is where we've projected that the equalization or capacity building grant will be transferred to reserve at the end of the year. Which leaves us, so if that weren't transferred, we would have a $1.1 million surplus projected, but we're projecting 619,000 plus setting that 500,000 in reserve. In addition to the operating, we did enclose the capital budget and the year-to-date and the projections. There's really nothing in particular to highlight there. We just wanted to give you a progress update. The really big things such as Pump Station 11, those are things that were already brought to council for approval, and things that weren't awarded were already things that were brought to council that were over budget.
Questions, the Director of Finance? Appreciate the updates. Yeah, Councilor Colwell.
The police fees, why are those so over budget? Or, I mean, we're calling it over budget, but I guess you've explained.
Yes. So the revenues are higher than anticipated. I believe they had some new contracts and had underestimated. And in talking with the police chief, I think he just found some greater productivity there, and they were able to get some extra work done.
Criminal records checks.
Yeah. So they do criminal records checks, and if it's a quiet day dispatch-wise, then they'll be busier doing those record checks. So,
It's significant.
Yep. And they take that and put that in reserve for.
Yes, we'll have that
Future
discussion
needs.
at the end of the fiscal year once we know if if their expenditures are not over budget, then we may add that to the reserve transfer for police.
Anyone know if the change to capacity building grant may be extended? Does anyone?
They only committed to this year. My understanding is the mandate. The mandate letter had that whole thing would be looked at. So I'm anticipating that it won't go beyond this year.
But at the same time, they did indicate they were looking at our funding formulas, so
Yeah,
they haven't
said anything. The one thing is they are required to give 1 year's notice as well of any change to municipalities that may have a financial impact on them, so that you can plan for that. So if they haven't had that done, perhaps they'll extend it, but they only committed to this year.
I imagine the notice will come because there will just be some impact.
We'll need a 12-month notice. So even if they revise the formula or change that, they'll have to give it 12 months.
But they can just give notice that something's changing. Right? They don't have to, like if I remember when Minister Porter,
what it is.
when Minister Porter gave us notice, it was just, I'm giving you notice that what was that item? It was just
vague,
letting you know something's happening. And we're like, oh, okay. And then I remember the NSFM kind of saying, this then popped back up a year later with no additional detail until it was, here you go.
Mm-hmm.
The funding formula change will be what's interesting. It could be beneficial, hopefully recognizing the burden that towns carry over others, or it could be, my worry is it could be more detrimental to us. They don't recognize it.
They could get wrapped up in the service exchange review and all that.
Questions, other comments? Councilor Thorburn?
Just one, and this is a great report. Great job. Economic action plan, we had budgeted, I think, 5, but our projections is 65. We're showing negative of $60,000.
So the negative means it's over budget.
Right.
But it's only over budget in the expenditures on that negative number, but we have the revenue as a positive over we've received grants exceeding the budget by that amount. And it was 50,000 was placemaking, and there were some small amounts making up the difference.
But it wasn't in the proposed budget.
That's right.
That's where I'm having the issue.
Yeah. So we received that grant of $50,000 and then $10,000 for another placemaking initiative. And when we got that grant, as Kim said, you're going to have the benefit on the revenue side, but we had to spend it as well. So because it wasn't in the budget, we had it projected as a
good answer.
Yeah.
We have a number of smaller, and they don't always stand out in this report because it's so condensed. Yeah. But there are quite a number of operating grants either already received or that we've applied for during the year that don't get that don't stand out. It might be $4,000 or $5,000, but it has an impact overall.
Okay, great, thank you.
Other comments? Okay, perfect. Well, you don't get to go far because you have the recommendation of the Director of Finance or write-off.
Yes, so my laptop so I can print this one off. We have two accounts that we have suggested for write-off. My computer's asleep, so I'm going to go from memory. One was for a mobile home, which moved out of town, and we can no longer collect. Can't find the owner, and we've been trying for a number of years to collect that. It's the one of the only ways that property taxes can't be collected through tax sale when the
Actual property goes?
the actual property moves outside of town. Our hands are a bit tied. And the other one was just a small amount for some property damage that was unpaid. I think it was about $75 plus interest. Overall, I think the amount that we requested for write-off included a fair amount of interest, but it's because of the one property tax that we've been trying to collect. And, sometimes if they move back to town, we have some recourse, but it's been long enough now that we've just kind of tried. We don't necessarily say it's over and done with. If they were to come back in the future, we would still try to collect that.
Questions on those? Someone prepared to make a motion? The Mayor?
I move that the Council for the Town of Bridgewater approve the write-off accounts as outlined in document 21-170 totaling $1,966.20, which includes accumulated interest of $555.18.
Thank you. Seconded by Councilor Conklin. Further discussion? None. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Our next item is giving notice of change to our to policy 81, which is our flag flying policy. Just to tidy that up a little bit. So as you know, every time someone wants to fly flag at community flagpole, it has to be approved by council. So these changes would be made to, if approved by council. The first request for an organization would be approved by council, but then subsequent requests could be done by staff so that it just it makes it more efficient. So, for example, using the pride flag as an example, they've already been approved by council year after year after year, so there's no need to approve them year after year after year. So that would just streamline it, and it would help us avoid the situation we had with the transgender Day of Remembrance and the flag. So, if someone's prepared to make a notice, just to give notice, make a motion to give notice for the January 10th council meeting, that would be helpful.
Question.
Yes.
The organization still has to make the request every year, do they?
Yes.
It just doesn't have to come to council.
Yeah.
Just go to staff.
Because sometimes the days move as well, right? And, maybe they don't work that year. Someone prepared to Councilor Thorburn.
I would move that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater give notice pursuant to Section 48 of the Municipal Government Act that at January the 10th, 2022 council meeting, amendments to the Policy 81 flag flying will be considered to enable a more timely staff response annually after initial approval by council.
Thank you. Seconded by Councilor McDonald. Any discussion?
Just a question. Has council in the past considered whether or not the council approval is necessary? Like, could we set standards and leave it up to the discretion of the CAO to make the calls on flying flags?
We haven't had I can't speak to previous council. We haven't had a formal discussion. I know that the concerns that I can't remember if anyone else raised them. The concerns that I raised is then that one person makes that decision. So we can certainly discuss it. My fear would be if you have someone, again, that one person who's in a position who may disagree with that organization, whether it's based on their religious beliefs or personal beliefs or something, that versus the 7 people, I would worry about the risk. I know that I spoke to the mayor of Yarmouth that for them it used to be up to one person, and they now changed that the other way because of issues.
Mm-hmm.
But we can discuss it at the January 10th meeting.
If council felt there was a need to discuss it, I thought it was worth mentioning as a possibility.
I know it came up when we had the transgender flag, and I know that for municipality district Lunenburg, for example, the CAO can make that decision.
Right.
I guess for me, it would be the risk of what happens if they don't make that decision, and council sitting there saying, "We would have approved that." So I don't know how you balance it out. I'm not saying you would do that.
No.
Tammy?
Well, I thought of that. Like if a group was denied, they could appeal to council through policy.
No, that's true.
And you could set out standards in the policy of what we would accept as a flag. But anyway,
I think it's worth discussing on
debate.
the 10th. I would raise it again on the 10th, and as we have the debate on that issue, maybe it's worth going down that road.
Okay, then it'd be easier for community groups to have their flag flown, perhaps. But this is a logical step. What's proposed?
We have a motion. We have a seconder. Any further questions? Hearing none. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. We already have 2 items on the agenda. They're coming back in January. Next item is recommendation of staff for Heritage Advisory Committee citizen appointment. Someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Caldwell.
Move the council for the town of Bridgewater appoint Katrina Swift as a citizen member to the Heritage Advisory Committee, effective immediately for a 2-year term ending December 31st, 2023.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor McDonald. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. That's a great addition to that committee. Next item, 10.11, is Lunenburg County Senior Safety Program November 2021 report. Yeah, I'm just going to sound like a broken record every month that this comes in. So I don't know where we'd be without this program. And pre-COVID, during COVID, I know post-COVID, it'll be such a valuable resource for seniors. So that's there for people's perusal. 10.12 is the December 6th discussion session briefing notes. There, I don't know if people have any questions or comments on those. Again, those will be posted on the town website for the public to review. And I would also always encourage people, if you have questions, email member of council, you can email staff if you have questions coming out of any of these meetings. The next item is RFP 2021-14, consulting services for the development of a funding and investment system for local energy projects. I see Mr. DeVried is here. I'm assuming that's who's going to walk us through this. Welcome, Leon.
Thank you, Council. Yeah, for sure. Do I sound better here? Yes. Is it getting my good side?
Yes.
Okay, good evening. I don't have a presentation for this item, but the last time Council reviewed this item, it was to try to acquire consulting services for the development of one of the 5 kind of core program areas of the Energized Bridgewater program, which is the investment system. Council agreed to not award RFP 2021-09, and we made the tactical call to go back to market to see if we could acquire the services that we were looking for through a reissued RFP. And unfortunately, at the time that the RFP closed, no proposals were received. So having tested the market twice for these services and having some indication that there is expertise out there, it's just that we're not able to acquire it using our open market process. The recommendation of staff is to close RFP 2021-14 and pursue alternative procurement practices for the purpose of acquiring the necessary consulting services. And under the guidance of the CAO, we've been in touch with potential consultants to work with on this item. There is some tentative interest in working with the town, It's just, it may be that we need to put together a flexible contract to acquire those services.
Any questions? Deputy Mayor? Leon, did they give you any feedback as to why they didn't bid on the actual open market version?
Tammy, would you like to respond to
Yeah.
any of these items?
I think some of it was just time to respond and to put that together, other engagements, those types of things that were obstructing the ability to do that. And also, I think we concluded that there was, with the first round, that the proposals didn't quite, and we did bring that to council to say that at that time, none of them met the scoring to move to the next step, looking at the actual price, because there was strengths and weaknesses in both. One proposal wasn't quite complete. So as Leon said, it may involve us kind of looking at how we make that work through a creative contract. It may be one, it may be two components that we have to kind of look at combining. Just the interest wasn't there. Some of them, what we were looking for is a certain product, right? It's a community energy investment system type project where you're looking at whether it's a seeded, but it's nonprofit. So it's a little bit of a different product, and so some had that experience, but not the financial modeling, and vice versa. So.
Yeah. And then the second time we went to market, one of the proponents that had said that they were interested in rebidding had acquired another client and was unable to respond. So timing issues were a real challenge. Yeah.
Questions? Someone prepared to make a motion to close the RFP out? Councillor Coughlin?
I move that Council for the Town of Bridgewater direct staff to close RFP 2021-14, consulting services for the development of a funding and investment system for local energy projects, and to pursue alternative procurement practices for the purpose of acquiring the necessary consulting services to complete this work.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Caldwell. Further discussion? Question being called. All those in favor?
Sorry.
Yep, sorry.
Having gone out to market twice without success, does that open the opportunity to look at alternative procurement, or was that always an option?
No. Well, I would say it's not an option because we weren't convinced that there wasn't a proponent out there who couldn't do this.
Okay.
Work, right, so that there are multiple ones. So I would have came to you with alternative procurement if we felt there was only one.
Right. Okay.
But in this case, we did clearly have two proposals that bid. They just didn't meet what we needed at the time. And second time around, timing was an issue given their commitments on other projects. So alternative procurement in this case is justified, as your procurement policy in the trade agreements say. If you've gone to the market and you tested it and you can't get it, then you can go to alternative procurement.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Good question, though. All right, with the mover and seconder, all those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Your RFP is closed. Down to business arising unfinished business. Coordinated Access Service Agreement with South Shore Open Doors Association, otherwise known as SODA. So when people hear us say soda, they know we're not in here drinking cans of pop.
Just going to connect to the projector here.
Perhaps.
Is that good? Okay, perfect. There we go. So, good evening again. So this item here represents the culmination of quite a number of months of work between town staff and a large number of community partners. The item has come before council a number of times over the past year, and this sort of represents the outcome of that process. Just as a reminder, coordinated access is one of those 5 core program areas of the Energize Bridgewater program, and seeks to connect Bridgewater residents, including those facing issues related to energy poverty and insufficient access to energy efficient housing and so on, with enhanced community services and an improved experience in connecting with the services that they need. So the item, as I said, has come before Council a few times. The most recent time was when Council directed staff to enter into direct negotiations with the South Shore Open Doors Association, which was on October the 25th. But as you can see, there was quite a process that led to that. And it follows primarily on a full year of work led by our consultant, Lisa Ryan, who is a coordinated access specialist who has been working in the Bridgewater community for the past 12 months with community partners to design and pull together this system. So this is where this work comes from. And just from a procurement perspective, a reminder that this follows on EOI 2021-01, which was a request for expressions of interest to provide the service. So just as a reminder, the South Shore Open Doors Association is a newly established nonprofit organization governed by a board of directors who are named here. And a reminder that the organization does have has the support of a wide range of community partners that serve Bridgewater residents. So this was very much a community-supported solution that came together here. As you can see from the vision, mission statement, and objectives of the organization, the association does reference energy-efficient housing, affordable housing, and energy poverty as some of the core reasons why the organization has been created. And so there's a very good alignment from a organizational purpose perspective with the town of Bridgewater's needs and vision around supporting residents in need with coordinated access services. I won't get into the details around the service provision and how that works. You've received a presentation or two, including from Lisa Ryan, about that work. But since Council directed us to draft an agreement, that is attached to this staff report. And just in broad strokes, the agreement establishes a service delivery arrangement in accordance with an important design document that was created, which is the Coordinated Access Guide that was developed by Ms. Ryan for the town. And the expectation is that the work of the system will meet federal requirements that really stipulate how coordinated access is to work. So there are standards around that work. It involves the provision of a system that connects housing and community partners together, and that there's a database called HIFIS, Homeless Individuals and Families Information System, and that would be established for Bridgewater and area, and would begin serving Bridgewater clients and connect them to services that they require. The draft agreement stipulates that the service must integrate with energized Bridgewater services, and it explains a number of ways that must happen. And it includes that energy poverty is part of the referral process. So clients are referred based on whether they experience energy poverty, in addition to a number of other situations in their life that they may be in need of services for. And that data must be reported, of course, in an anonymized way to Bridgewater. And the big stipulation is that the service managed to serve 350 households in Bridgewater and surrounding area by March of 2025, in line with our current contribution agreement for the Smart Cities Challenge through Infrastructure Canada. And also that service be continued until at minimum March 2026. A number of safety provisions that the contract requires include the necessary background checks for staff and volunteers, data security requirements, and the necessary level of insurance for the work that they'll be doing. And as part of the agreement, SODA will complete regular reporting to the town, including things like client numbers and where community members are residing, as well as a host of other anonymized information. And one of the things that we try to strike a balance with in the contract is also how do we maintain a bit of a Bridgewater focus in this work? And so the agreement now indicates that SODA services will be based in Bridgewater. If there is any physical location for people to go to, it'll be on the bus route. It'll be within walking distance of commercial areas in town. So there's a real stipulation for that localness to Bridgewater. And in order to be counted in that 350 household designation, households must either live in Bridgewater or be accessing community services in Bridgewater. Beyond that, it's really difficult to draw a hard boundary right around Bridgewater because of the real integrated nature of our community and our service providers with neighboring communities. The maximum service area is also Lunenburg County. The cost of the service was previously reviewed by council when we brought the EOI here. As you can see, the only significant change since the last time you reviewed the 4-year funding arrangement is that there is we've managed to move the contract forward actually a little faster than anticipated, and thus we are able to begin service provision in this current fiscal year. And we've made the contract includes a provision through which SODA will receive an initial advance in order to open their office, begin to hire staff, and so on, just because there's always a delay in submitting receipts and submitting invoices, and they can't really do anything without the town's initial advance. So that's how the contract breaks out over what's now 5 fiscal years, and the key feature there is a declining reliance on Town of Bridgewater funding, which of course is also 100% funded by the Smart Cities Challenge grant. There is a significant part of the contract that relates to performance management, and this is a bit of a new thing for us. We're not counting receipts for the organization in exchange for their effort, or just looking at bodies that have come through the door. We are looking at things like accuracy of referrals, staffing levels, number of clients served, data collection provisions, and that's all explained under a performance management section that the town can then use in order to ensure that performance doesn't slip. And if that does happen in a sustained way over time, the contract includes provisions to permit budget reduction, contract changes, contract termination, and so on. So that is the way that the town intends to maintain the relationship and the quality of the work that will be carried out. But as long as the organization continues to perform as expected, the town will continue funding their services, and they'll continue providing monthly invoices for their work. As a final note, there's a no exclusivity provision, which means that should the town, should there be reason to contract with another entity or another consultant, say these are not exclusive services, and either party may terminate the agreement with 3 months written notice. So the recommendation, therefore, is that staff recommends that Bridgewater Town Council approve the proposed coordinated access service agreement between the town of Bridgewater and the South Shore Open Doors Association, and direct staff to finalize and execute the agreement in substantive accordance with the draft attached to this report. Thank you.
Questions, Mr. DeReed, Councilor McDonald?
Sorry, it just kind of came to me, so I was trying to scroll quickly and see if it was addressed in the agreement. But we could give them $400,000 to start up, and 3 months later they could pull out of the agreement. Is there any provision to recoup any of those funds should they pull out within a certain period of time?
I believe that there's a clause in the agreement that talks about sort of fair costs incurred, and so if costs are incurred, the agreement is that those costs will be honored. Sort of I think that the wording is pro rata, so depending on what has been spent within billing periods. Really, it's hard to envision a situation where the organization would just decide to not offer services, especially right at the beginning. I mean, they've worked quite hard in order to get things started and get the ball rolling. So it's a little difficult to envision that, but I mean, the relationship that we're setting up with the organization is actually a service relationship. So they're providing services to the town, and in exchange for services, they invoice us and we pay them. So if services have been delivered, the services need to be paid.
a minimum contract be established? Like, we have to give this at least a 1-year trial before you can give 3 months notice, so that I'm just worried about that initial investment, potential to lose that initial investment. And if somebody else, go to a contract with somebody else, we have to make that initial investment again.
So it's the value of the contract's $400,000, but it's not paid all up front.
Right.
So it's $30,000 is the advance, and then after that, it's monthly installments for annual contributions.
The most we can lose is $30,000 if something
That's
goes
your
awry.
advance. Yeah. And that's kind of their startup.
Right.
Recognizing that they need those funds to get started, and then it's a monthly installment based on our annual contract for services. And there is the termination clause that it's in Part 9, kind of just alluding to what Leon said, that we can terminate the agreement in whole or part if such termination is in the best interest of the town without showing cause upon giving written notice to the contractor. Is that the 30 or 3 months, Leon?
There's a 90-day provision.
90 day, yeah. And then we have to pay any costs that the contractor may have incurred up to that point. Okay.
That's a good question, Deputy Mayor Tanner.
I didn't notice it in the agreement, Leon, but I thought it might be helpful if one of the criteria for deciding how they're doing or monitoring how they're doing is, would they be doing a client survey? So getting feedback from the client themselves as to how the process went and that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a number of client-related evaluation activities, and they actually have to do a complete evaluation plan. So they need to assess how the service is going, how clients are responding to it, whether they're being successful or not at actually connecting people with the services that they need. So interestingly, in the contract, it references the evaluation plan, but that's actually almost in addition to a bunch of the statistical data that we're collecting. Yeah, so they're required to do that.
And just one other, it references the coordinated access guide, but I'd asked for a copy of that. I couldn't find that anywhere. I found the Moncton one, but developed it.
Yeah, so it's in kind of beta state right now. It's a document that I'm not sure is publicly available on the web right now. But I can certainly acquire a copy and circulate it. Yeah, for sure. I will ask SODA to support that.
Councilor Colon.
I noticed soda will be serving households in, it sounds like, all of Lunenburg County. So perhaps I'm mistaken, but I thought the intention was for it to be based for town residents and in the first phase and then expand, but maybe I was mistaken.
Yeah, so the agreement actually with Infrastructure Canada was that the service needs to start, and it's starting in Bridgewater. But from the earliest design work that was done around this, there was never a hard boundary set on Bridgewater. And the reason for that is that the service organizations that serve, that would have to be part of the system, have service areas that are larger than Bridgewater. So for Bridgewater to say, you can use this funding, but only for our residents, doesn't actually work for the service relationship with the partners. And so to not be able to fund the system for outside of Bridgewater's borders is really difficult to justify. I mean, there's basically very few organizations that only serve Bridgewater residents. And if we said we're only creating a system that serves Bridgewater, then what's the incentive for other organizations to join in the system? So the federal government, essentially through the Smart Cities Challenge, is funding the startup of this system in Bridgewater and area. And that was always the intention around the funding. What we've then done is we've picked the 350 number in order to have a quantitative number that still connects back to Bridgewater. So either Bridgewater residents or acquiring services in Bridgewater. And that's an arrangement that's been in discussion with the partners for many months now.
And we did have a conversation as well at the mayors and wardens meeting in November to discuss this project. Angela actually came to talk about the coordinated access system, and it was acknowledged that it's hard to draw those lines at a town boundary and not allow anyone into that system. That we had the infrastructure funding through our Smart Cities application that supported this at that scale, but that funding would be diminished as the program got established, and that the region at some time would have to have that debate about whether or not they, as other municipal units within Lunenburg County, were prepared to help fund the program as we pulled back on. The funding would run out from us eventually to a much smaller amount, and so they are aware of that, and it'd be up to SOTA at that point to initiate that request in a more formal way with each of them.
Excellent. That was my follow-up question.
Yeah.
That's a good explanation.
I'll say one more thing because I should have mentioned it, but sometimes the system will be dealing with people who are extraordinarily housing insecure. And if we were to say, for example, you have to be a resident of Bridgewater, but they spend their summer out in the county and the winter, sleeping on someone's couch, like in Bridgewater, like by drawing that hard boundary, we may actually not be able to serve some of our most vulnerable residents who are actually have a real transience in housing. And so because we don't want that situation to occur where we're arbitrarily cutting people off from service, we need to make sure that there's a bit of a flexible boundary when we provide that service.
Other questions, Councilor Caldwell?
Once approved, when should we expect the system to be operational?
Yeah, so SOTA's current plan is to use the advance to hire staff, get their insurance and operations and everything up and running. The current plan is for SOTA to essentially build up their office in the first few months of 2022. And the current timeline is for services to really begin being offered as soon as possible. That could be a few months. It really depends on them staffing up in order to be able to provide that service. So they're looking for an administrator to basically maintain their operations. They're going to be trying to bring in a system planner to continue working with all the partners to do all the planning work. And then there's also a provision for bringing on housing support workers in order to actually work directly with clients as well in order to boost that capacity in the area. The current goal is that basically by the end of March, their service is being provided.
Other questions? Comments? Someone prepared to make a motion? Councilor McDonald?
We move that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater endorse the recommendation of staff and approve the proposed coordinated access service agreement between the Town of Bridgewater and South Shore Open Doors Association, and direct staff to finalize and execute the agreement in substantive accordance with the draft contained in document 21-058C.
Seconded by Councilor Coughlin. Further discussion? Quick discussion. Question may call. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, Leon. Our next item is affordable housing scope of work. I will just, as Nick's coming down, I think you're coming down to speak to it, yeah? As he's coming down, we do have an in-camera item after this that is under Section 22.2A, municipal property under the MGA. It is time sensitive, so what we'll do is after we go through the housing scope of work, we will recess council, go in camera, discuss that item, come out of camera, and make a decision, resume the council meeting and make a decision. So there'll be a pause to the live stream while we go in camera, and then there'll be a resumption of the live stream after. So that will be the item 11.3, I guess, added to the agenda. or 12.1. Pick a number. Sandy will add it to the agenda. Okay. Sorry, Nick, over to you.
Okay. Council has a report outlining the proposed scope of work for the review of planning policy, review of bylaw regulations, as well as incentive programs and broader strategies with respect to the provision of affordable housing. The report identifies in-scope activities, including finalizing the housing affordability background report. Such will provide an overview of the current state of housing, including emerging housing needs, impact on local services and programs, and community-based solutions to increase housing that is affordable. Backgrounder is completed. However, housing needs assessment born out of the forthcoming census data in the spring will be used to augment that document. Also, we will move coordinated access work with Energized Bridgewater forward as a key component of addressing affordable housing, as you just heard. Review other municipal land use bylaws that already include measures to address affordable housing to see what might be applicable in Bridgewater. Strengthen the current affordable housing definition and density bonus provision included in the land use bylaw to increase enforceability and contribution. Frame up discussion, the planning document amendments to include inclusionary zoning going forward. Identify opportunities to incentivize infill and gentle density throughout the town, including but not limited to reducing minimum lot size requirements, permitting development of secondary units and accessory structures where they aren't permitted today, reducing expansion controls in the restricted commercial zone, primarily Dufferin Street, enabling a variance to maximum height, and increase permissions for habitation of accessory structures and temporary structures, among other smaller amendments. We will review population forecasts and connect with HRM and Modal for updates to those projection models. Collaborate with local housing service providers to develop housing resource materials to distribute internally and to community partners. The creation and maintenance of such a resource would be the responsibility of the partner organizations. We would issue an RFQ for a consultant to conduct a feasibility study of affordable housing incentive strategies. This work would include a legislative scan to see what's available to the town, a review of other municipal units, both locally and more broadly, engagement with stakeholders, including developers, and overall setting the stage for a strategy that is consistent in its implementation. And with the remainder of the $25,000 budgeted previously or for this year for a housing needs assessment, we would develop an emergency grant for nonprofit organizations providing housing support to residents in Bridgewater and area. Such grants could be aimed at addressing various facets of the housing crisis, including support to those providing wraparound services and support and or growing nonprofit and social housing opportunities. There are some out-of-scope activities that I'll quickly list. Those would include the planning document review process to fully address existing policies related to affordable housing, addressing affordable housing costs in the form of long-term subsidies or grants, and that would be based on the feasibility study findings, conducting that housing needs assessment based on the forthcoming census data, and ultimately directly increasing about affordable housing stock, including developing new units or permitting temporary shelters. The report also defines in-scope activities in a deliverables table with anticipated completion dates associated with each item. And so that's the scope of work, and so therefore the recommendation to council would be to endorse that scope of work and sets that in motion on these in-scope activities.
Questions on that? I feel like we're getting there. Someone prepared to make a motion? Councilor Colwell.
I move that council for the town of Bridgewater endorse the scope of work and funding reallocation as outlined in document 20-21 5F.
Seconded by Councillor Thorburn. Discussion?
Question.
Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you to staff for getting that back to us. Quite timely, so that's much appreciated. So we're going to, don't go far, Nick, because you're going to be up. So we're going to go in camera. Can I have a motion to recess council?
So moved.
Councillor Thorburn, seconded by Mayor Tanner. All those in favor? So we'll just wait for Pat to give us the all clear. All right, we'll call this council meeting, regularly scheduled council meeting, back to order. We have new business 12.1 land matter, and I will ask for a motion from a member of council. Councillor Thorburn was first.
I would move that council of the town of Bridgewater endorse execution of a purchase and sale agreement for 7.16 acres at 25 Cook Road, as directed at an in-camera meeting held December 13th, 2021.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Conklin. Had the information from staff. Any other questions? Hearing none. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. That's 2021 for council. Obviously, business continues and people are encouraged to reach out to councillors if they have any questions. But that's it for this year. Motion to adjourn. So Councillor Thorburn, seconded by Councillor Caldwell. We are adjourned.